listening to the NFL Draft Bible Podcast Network, part of Sports Illustrated, giving you daily NFL Draft, Dynasty, and Devy Fantasy Football podcasts.
It's football time, and this is the Blitz. I'm your host, Matt Hicks, CFF educator, joined as always by John Lobb, the Gridiron Scholar, and Skip Newton to give you all your college fantasy football information you need for week 8 of the college football season. Gentlemen, it is a interesting slate to say the least coming up here on week 8. It's going to take some extra digging into our CFF sleepers section, our marvelous matchups, and we have identified some really great best bets and DFS plays. Gentlemen, it's been a great few weeks of college football. You ready for another good one?
Absolutely, my friend.
Yeah, I am definitely ready. And the best thing about doing this podcast, well, not the best thing, but one of the really good things is it's my weekly reminder that every time you play the intro, I've got to do the create an avatar bit that you guys told me about, months ago, and I keep forgetting. And then every week I'm reminding of it, and then I forget about it again.
Well, Skip, you got a few things going on. A lot of college football to follow, a lot of NFL to follow, and then I guess like your real life too. So we'll let it slide just one more week, all right?
Yeah, Zach constantly hounding on me. Get those articles in. And so let's blame Zach. I think that feels good.
All right, gentlemen, let's kick it off here with the news and notes of the week. Some big ones here coming up. Tennessee redshirt junior Hendon Hooker, who was injured on the final drive for the Vols this past weekend. He's considered day-to-day, according to Josh Heupel. That's actually better news than we originally anticipated, so we may be spared from Joe Milton versus Alabama. That is to be decided.
Everyone's nightmare.
Oh, trust me, brother. Personally. Man. Georgia redshirt junior quarterback JT Daniels is back at practice this week. Kirby Smart has been quoted as calling him rusty, so we'll take that. We'll take that however you will here. We may see JT Daniels this week. Keep an eye on it. We may still see Stetson Bennett. UCLA junior wide receiver Kyle Phillips is expected to return this upcoming weekend. Illinois redshirt senior quarterback Brandon Peters is expected to miss week 8 against Penn State. And Vanderbilt sophomore quarterback Ken Seals will not start against Mississippi State. You remember he was injured late in that late comeback win for South Carolina last weekend. A slew of TCU injury updates. Junior quarterback Max Duggan is probable for Saturday. J.D. Spielman, the wide receiver, will not play Saturday against the Mountaineers. He has been ruled out. And running back Zach Evans is probable for Saturday. USC is reporting that quarterback Jackson Dart is still not medically cleared, so it looks to be the unfortunate for many folks. It looks like we will not see Jackson Dart for another week. We are not expected to see quarterback Sean Clifford from Penn State as well. His status is uncertain. South Carolina freshman quarterback Luke Doty is scheduled to undergo season-ending surgery. So it seems like South Carolina has finally decided to stop the experiment of Luke Doty playing through the season. And Kentucky senior wide receiver Josh Ali with an undisclosed injury is not expected back this week, but is expected back for the Halloween weekend matchup against Mississippi State. So one more weekend without him there for the Wildcats. FAU quarterback N'Kosi Perry, remember formerly of the Miami Hurricanes. He has been looking good in relief, and he's going to start against Charlotte this upcoming Thursday. Maryland redshirt sophomore wide receiver Jashwan Jones with a leg injury is out for the year. Remember, that is on top of Dante Demas being ruled out for the year, so the Terps are getting pretty thin there at wide receiver. We'll actually circle back to that gentleman in the DFS section. Miami senior running back Cameron Harris with a knee injury is out for the year. The Hurricanes truly cannot catch a break. And Ole Miss quarterback Matt Corral is currently unlikely to play versus LSU, but we have not gotten an update super recently, so we'll keep an eye on Matt Corral, but I don't think we can expect to play him. Gentlemen, from the news and notes, omissions, additions?
Well, I'm very worried about my Jahan Dotson shares without Sean Clifford. It was not last time we saw Penn State without Clifford at quarterback. That was a little bit depressing in that game. They couldn't move the football at all. So no matter what you think of Clifford, he's clearly the best option for the Nittany Lions. So that hurts a little bit. I certainly hope Zach Evans gets back on the field. I still need to do more analysis of the TCU running back. The young man would like to see him play a little bit more. And I think everyone wants to see a little bit of Jackson Dart, but we have to be patient. He is a freshman. There's no need to rush him. As fans, we want to see him. As Devy analysts, we want to see him. But from a USC perspective, you got to get the young man healthy and back on the field.
So that was going to be my question for you guys. When he is medically cleared to play, are you expecting him to be inserted as the starter to take over right away?
I do, but it depends. So this is interesting because you have a weird scenario here. You have an intern head coach, but then you have the 4-game redshirt rule, right? So for the university, the better decision, in my opinion, would be to redshirt him, not use up his eligibility. But you have a intern coach who probably wants to get some victories under his belt, right? And wants to see the young man play. So where do you go? Is there anyone who is going to be able to make that final decision in the athletic department or the football department? What's best for the young man is the best to the coach, the university. So there's a lot of acts you're trying to balance here. I think he's going to play.
Yeah, and I think the other thing you have to consider too as well is when does he come back? Will USC be technically out of it? Will they have an outside shot still at a conference title? It's not looking like they're in a position right now, but the Pac-12, especially the Pac-12 South, is so weak that if we see Utah trip up, if we see Arizona State trip up, USC, by the time he comes back, he may still have a shot. You're probably going to want to roll with the veteran, right? That's a tough transition, a tough situation to put the young guy into.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking. I guess I wasn't expecting him to just jump right back in there, but strange things happen. You never know what these guys are thinking. So I was just curious what you guys thought.
And look at you know what? This Caleb Williams is so good. I think there's pressure from alumni and fans. Let's see what we have now, right? Like all of a sudden the equation has changed because of the success at Oklahoma.
All right, gentlemen, let's see what we have here at the top of the Week 8 slate. It is our marvelous matchups. Remember, these are our highest over-under spreads of the week. The reason we point these out is because generally when Vegas pegs a high over-under, that means lots of points. And gentlemen, that means fantasy points. So we're going to go through each matchup here, identify the top ones, and tell you the fantasy relevancy. John, let's start here with the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers traveling to the great state of Florida, taking on FIU. It is a 76.5-point spread. Western Kentucky is laying 15 here. What are we looking at?
It's fascinating because they're expecting 11 touchdowns in this game. So I immediately looked at the two defenses. How bad are they? Florida International surrenders 482 points or yards per game, 37 points per game, basically. Western Kentucky, 474 yards per game, 35 points per game. So Vegas is really close here. I think you're going to end up with anywhere from 72 to 80. Just depends if they get that 11th touchdown. I'm going to talk about my biggest sleeper later in the show, but it's Tyrese Chambers, the wide receiver for the Golden Panthers. If he's on your waiver wire, go and get this young man immediately. He is having a terrific season. I watched him against Charlotte 2 weeks ago on a Friday night. 3 catches, 201 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He averages almost 30 yards a reception. Tyrese Chambers, the Hilltoppers are going to score. That means Florida International is going to put the ball in the air. So you got to go get him if you need a wide receiver. Then obviously Jared Stearns is having one of the great seasons I've ever seen out of a wide receiver. the numbers are silly. He might win the Biletnikoff. People aren't talking about it, but if you look at Jared Stern's raw numbers, he's been unbelievable, especially in PPR leagues. Mitchell Tinsley, he could be available for the Hilltoppers. Malachi Corley, another wide receiver you could get. Hey, when you got 11 touchdowns in the game, you want a starting wide receiver when the quarterback, Bailey Zappi, throws 4 or 5 touchdowns every game. I wouldn't touch the running backs in this game. Not someone I'm interested in. I do like the running back, Devonta Price. The problem is the game script could go away and he doesn't get the touches.
All right, Skip, heading on south here. LSU traveling to Ole Miss. A lot of narratives here. Of course, we're watching for Matt Corral. LSU still playing with Ed Ogeron, but they now understand that he will no longer be their coach after this season. Regardless, it's a 76-point spread. LSU coming off of a shootout with Florida. And Ole Miss is laying 9 here. What are we looking for?
Well, I think you named it when you started it off by, really paying attention to Matt Corral. And it's the people that probably aren't playing that we care the most about. You got Matt Corral on the Ole Miss side. You've got Kayshon Boutte on the LSU side. We'll start with LSU. They're averaging 32 points a game. Quarterback Max Johnson has been looking good. He's throwing for 266 yards a game. He's got 20 touchdowns to just 4 picks. So I like Max Johnson. I'm still going to get him a starting grade. He's an A grade. However, last week against Florida, that first game without Boutte, he only threw for 133 yards. So something to keep in mind because they went to the running game in a massive way. I'll talk about that in just a second. Wide receiver, you've got Jaray Jenkins. I'm going to give him a B grade only because of the way he ate up a lot of those targets when Boutte was out. He only has 14 catches for 170 yards on the season and 3 touchdowns, all 3 coming against Florida last week. So he might be the guy filling in. So I like him as a guy that you can just throw in your lineup because there's bye weeks and injuries, of course. Then Jack Beck is an interesting play because he's listed as both a wide receiver and tight end. So you could play him in your tight end position, 24 catches, 292 yards, and a score. Another wide receiver that I'm not going to play, but I just want to mention him, Brian Thomas Jr., the freshman, 16 catches for 212 yards, but he hasn't scored. I don't feel confident putting him in the lineup, so keep him on your bench. But the big surprise, Tyrion Davis-Price, the guy that I have loved for over a year and from out of nowhere has a monster game, 287 yards and 3 touchdowns against Florida. Absolutely dominant. He has 574 and 5 on the season, and he isn't used much in the passing game at all. But if they're gonna shift over to a running attack without Boutte, you gotta have an A grade on Davis-Price. So I'm throwing him in the lineup. On the Ole Miss side, they're averaging 43.5 points per game, and LSU's giving up 28. But Matt Corral is not likely to play. Obviously, if he plays, he's an A grade. But if he doesn't, that really takes out almost all of the offense because who are you going to trust in this offense? I'll talk about a couple guys I still would play. The first is wide receiver Dontario Drummond. He's a B grade if Corral doesn't play, a certain A grade if he does. He's got 526 yards and 6 touchdowns on the season. Braylon Sanders at wide receiver is questionable. You're going to leave him on the bench. Jonathan Mingo is out. So they are really hurting offensively. At running back, Snoop Connor is the guy that I would play a B grade. Maybe they lean more on the running game without Corral. He's got 271 yards. He doesn't lead the team in that statistic, but 9 touchdowns. That's right. He scored 9 times. So you got to have him in there. A couple other running backs, Henry Parish Jr., a C grade only because he does get more volume, 375 yards, but just the 1 score. However, he has caught 15 passes for 109 yards. Not bad. And I'm benching Jerrion Ealy. He just doesn't get enough volume, both running and receiving, to make up for it because he only has 1 score in the season. So no Jerrion Ealy for me.
All right, gentlemen, Tulane traveling to SMU to play the Ponies. Over under here, 70.5. SMU laying 13.5. SMU 6-0 here on the season and have put up some pretty big stat lines. 31 points against Navy, 41 against USF, 42 against TCU. But gentlemen, Tulane, they're 1-5, but it's not a bad 1-5. All right, you look at what they were able to do against Oklahoma early in the season. They hung in against UAB. We could be easily looking at a 3-3 team here. So I wouldn't rule out Tulane too much, especially when it comes to their offense. It's really based here in Michael Pratt. I could see Pratt really kind of taking ownership of this game. 13 touchdowns on the season, 1,300 yards. He's thrown the ball 190 times. Now, the Ponies, 6-0. It's a good team, but it's not necessarily a defensive unit. Gentlemen, they gave up 24 to Navy last week. All right? If Navy can put up 24, I think Tulane can put up 40. All right? Previous in the season, SMU 34 to TCU, 37 to La Tech. And so there's precedent here for teams to be able to hang around. I think this one turns into a shootout. If you're going to go ahead and look at the SMU side of the ball now, it's going to be a really kind of running through Tanner Mordecai. I'm a big fan of Tanner Mordecai. He certainly has the stats to back that up here on the season. Not as many touchdowns as you'd like, just 7, but 1,800 yards. You're going to be looking here at the running game as well. They're kind of splitting it right now. The lead volume here is Siggers with 392 yards on 86 carries, but Ulysses Bentley is there as well. Not high on the touchdowns, though. So it's really going to be a focus here and emphasis on the passing game. And I'll go ahead and jump into our next game here. It's Louisiana at Arkansas State. I think you can see a trend here at some of our highest scoring games of the week. We're really focusing on the G5. We have an over-under of 70. With Louisiana laying 18 points.
My colleague, Nicholas Allen of CFB Winning Edge, he's been doing statistics on how historically bad Arkansas State is on defense. Like some of his numbers, they are like UConn historically bad in 2018. Like in the history of college football, they rank in the bottom 10. And we're talking like 125 years of football.
Isn't this Butch Jones' team? Isn't that where Butch Jones ended up?
No, Butch Davis? Do you mean the former?
No, the former Tennessee coach.
You might be right.
That would explain the defense, that's for sure.
They are giving up 46.7 points per game, 584 yards. They're averaging almost 600 yards allowed. So that means once in a while they go over 600 yards. So when you have a defense that is surrendering almost 600 yards, you have to look at the other side of the ball. Levi Lewis is the quarterback, not the greatest thrower of the football. He does score points with his legs. You're looking at a team that could score 6 touchdowns rather easily. Levi Lewis, if you're desperate for a quarterback. And there's so many injuries. We didn't even speak, Matt, about Will Rogers. Mississippi State's quarterback isn't likely to play this week. So, and then Bryce Young, but I think it's looking a little bit better for Bryce Young, if from what I heard earlier in the week. But Levi Lewis could be a pickup. They use 3 running backs very effectively. Chris Smith, Montrell Johnson, and an Imani Bailey. I would probably play Montrell Johnson because he's the pounder. He's the inside guy, maybe more likely the goal line. Chris Smith has been coming on lately. If you do need a running back, you could use either of those. Now, the good part about Arkansas State, they're so bad on defense that forces them to throw the ball a ton. The problem is the quarterbacks. Look at Lane Hatcher. Right now, James Blackman is out. Lane Hatcher should play the whole game, which would be good for fantasy, but sometimes Arkansas State pulls their quarterbacks. I mean, if we knew that Lane Hatcher was going to play the whole game, I would be on him. He would be an interesting start, but you never know with these the Arkansas State. That can't be right. Corey Rucker, the wide receivers, Jeff Foreman, and T. Vanillis Hunt, the wide receiver. You could start either one of those 3 wide receivers this week.
All right. We're going to Ohio here for an interstate battle in the MAC. It's Kent State at Ohio, 66.5 with Kent State laying 5.5 points here. All right, the conversation has to begin with Kent State's Dustin Crum, a true dual threat. If you have Dustin Crum, you already know you're playing him. 1,500 yards through the air, 8 touchdowns, another 275 yards on the ground, and 5 touchdowns for Dustin Crum. Don't skip right past running back Marquez Cooper. Did not have a good matchup last week, kind of got game schemed out of Western Michigan. But if you go back to Buffalo 2 weeks ago, you had 112 yards and a touchdown. The week before that against Bowling Green, 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. Cooper also has a 100-yard game earlier in the season against Virginia Military Institute. So there's definitely precedent here for Marquez Cooper to have a successful week if you need to be digging deep here through the waiver wires like many of us are. Ohio on the other side, gentlemen, it's a little bit trickier. The quarterbacks, it's not a clear picture there with Rourke and Rodgers both seeing action. I'd be looking straight to the running game here and going with Demontre Tuggle. Again, a decent week last week, 46 yards and 8 attempts. He's found the end zone the last 3 weeks. And if you go back against Akron, he puts up over 200 yards. So he's got big play potential. Over the last 3 weeks, he's seen about 50 attempts, which is about double what he saw the first 4 games. So it looks like Ohio is trending towards using him. And so not a smash play here, but definitely somebody to keep the eye on if you have to dig a little bit deeper this week, like most of us are. All right, and we're going to go ahead and round it out here. Nevada at Fresno State.
This is the game of a couple of great quarterbacks. We'll start it off with Nevada averaging 36 points per game. And, of course, it's future first-round pick Carson Strong, A grade, averaging 331 yards a game, 16 touchdowns total, just 3 interceptions. Got to love Carson Strong. He's a strong play. Cole Turner at tight end might be one of the best tight ends in college. Another A grade, 34 catches, 403 yards, and 4 scores. He's always in your lineup. Romeo Dubs, the wide receiver, giving him a B grade, 26 for 387 and 2 scores. You'd think there'd be more wide receivers to play in this game. The problem is they spread the ball around so much that really Dubs is the only one that I'm recommending this week. Of course, him and Turner. And then at running back, you got Toa Tawa, B grade, 391 yards on the season. So not bad. He has scored 4 times. He also gets 15 catches for 99 yards, another score. So he is a little bit involved in the passing game as well. Moving on over to Fresno State, another A-grade quarterback, Jake Haener. Shout out to Felix Sharp. He's your guy. We all know it. 332 yards per game, 20 touchdowns, 6 picks. Also ran 3 scores in, and the dude is tough as nails. I love Jake Haener. Love him in this matchup as well. Jalen Cropper, wide receiver, A-grade, 48 catches for 546 yards and a whopping 10 touchdowns. If you've got Cropper in your lineup, you've been loving him all season. Of course, you're never taking him out. I'm going to play another wide receiver too, but just a C grade. But, with injuries and buys, I think you're probably playing Josh Kelly. He has caught 30 catches, 462 yards, and 2 scores. So a solid play there. Again, there's a lot of injuries going on, so you're probably looking for anything you can find. And then at running back, Ronnie Rivers is a guy that it feels like nobody's talking about, but he's a solid play. I'm giving him a B grade. He's ran the ball for 493 yards and 3 touchdowns. Solid numbers, not exciting, especially in the touchdown department. However, 25 catches for 254 yards is a really nice receiving game option. He also scored a touchdown there. So I like the combination of rushing receiving yards for Ronnie Rivers. So giving him a B grade.
All right. I like it. I like it, gentlemen. Let's move on to our CFF sleeper section. Each one of us have identified 1 quarterback, 1 running back, 1 wide receiver, and a flex play with a particular emphasis on trying to identify guys that you may not normally have previously identified as must plays this week. John, I'll let you go ahead and kick it off. John, you're on mute. John, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I keep muting. I have a new puppy, and the puppy was barking. Sorry, everyone. So I muted it, and then I forgot to unmute it. I apologize. If you need a quarterback this week, you could easily do a lot worse than Max Bortenschlager of the Florida International Golden Panthers. We talked about the over-under. In 4 of the last 5 games, he has scored over 23 fantasy points. 2 weeks ago on Friday night against Charlotte, he had 42.7 points, 466 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He is definitely more valuable in leagues that have 6-point passing touchdowns because he's not going to get you anything with his legs. He's definitely in the Keaton Slovis bucket for rushing yards. He's going to get you negative rushing yards every week. But if you need a quarterback, I like him. You got 11 touchdowns in this game projected by Vegas. He's only on 8% of teams. I like him a lot here. At running back, you might not have noticed it because of why he does kick off very late, especially if you're out on the East Coast there. But they have a new running back, a freshman, Day Hunter. In his last 5 games, 30, 12, 10, 14 fantasy points. But in the last 2, he has rushed for 127 and 174 yards rushing. The Rainbows play one of the worst rushing defenses in the nation, New Mexico State. If you need a running back at a flex position, Day Hunter, he's probably on your waiver wire. You can go and pick him up. One player I don't think I mentioned at all on our show this year, probably because we don't look at Akron as a passing team or someone who gives you a lot of help in fantasy community. But Kanata Mumpfield has been unbelievable the last 5 weeks. 18, 19, 17, 28, and 21 fantasy points. In the last 2 weeks, he is combined for 15 receptions and 215 yards and 2 touchdowns. If you need a wide receiver, Kanata Mumpfield of Akron, go get him on your waiver wire. Now, a little higher owned, I usually like to go lower, but Clayton Tune, it is too obvious of a matchup against Eastern Carolina here. I was shocked he was available in 67% of leagues. Now, Tune was hurt for a little bit, and he had a tough game against Grambling, but part of it, they blew him out. And I mean tough game from a fantasy standpoint. But he seemed to be healthy 2 weeks against Tulane. He put up 30 points at the quarterback position. I love him this week against East Carolina at home. Go get Clayton Tune.
All right, here we're gonna have a similar trend here, at least in the Houston Cougar world here, John. But before we get there, I'm gonna start here with Syracuse quarterback Garrett Schrader. Now, I was able to watch Syracuse a little bit more closely last week. I caught the Friday game against Clemson, and against a good Clemson defense, I thought Schrader put together a pretty respectable performance here, finding the end zone through the air. But Schrader's also been very competent there, running on the ground. So you have a real dual threat quarterback. Against Virginia Tech, I expected to be a close matchup here. I was trying to find the exact stats. 418 yards on the ground and 9 touchdowns. So that's really where Schrader kind of takes you over the top in terms of fantasy football relevancy. A lot of folks, I think, are going to fade him because it's Virginia Tech. But I think we're locked into a preseason idea of what Virginia Tech is. It's a football team that struggled this season, and there's certainly opportunity for a Syracuse team that took Clemson to the wire last week to continue to compete with them offensively. All right, and he's only 18% owned. It's a high ownership, 49%. It's still less than half. It's Alton McCaskill out of Houston. John mentioned the matchup against East Carolina. East Carolina has led up 52 to Tulane, or 29 to Tulane earlier this season, 38 to Marshall, 28 to Charleston Southern. All right, 16 to, my goodness, a struggling UCF team. And so there's certainly opportunity to beat up on East Carolina. When you look at Alton McCaskill himself, you have a really successful rusher, 403 yards at 86 attempts. And here's the money, gentlemen. He's found the end zone 8 times, over 1 touchdown on average per week. That is called fantasy football gold, and we're certainly going to take advantage of it. All right, we're going to head to the wide receiver position here, and then we're going to go with Puka, and I can never get it right. I think it's Nakau for BYU, 7% play here. Obviously, he had a big week last week, but I know BYU had been hyping him up even before that. On the season, 20 receptions, 444 yards, and 1 touchdown. I think we have a really good situation for BYU. BYU is reeling off of a bad loss. I think they're going to be ready to open the offense back up. And they're playing a Washington State team that is just going to be sorely underprepared for no fault of their own, losing 5 coaches this week. We're not even going to get into that conversation, but it is a fact that and it would not be the players' fault for them to be underprepared and not ready for this good BYU offense. And gentlemen, remember, I almost went back to the quarterback position because Jared Hall ended up having a great game last week with that big 60-yard rush. So I went with the BYU in the sleeper section last week. We're going to roll with them again. And for my flex spot, I'm taking Utah's Cameron Rising. Now, the Utah offense has been very efficient under Cameron Rising. Struggled a little bit early last week against Arizona State, but helped lead the Utes to a big comeback win against the Sun Devils. You look at the week before against USC, 22 for 28, 306 yards, 3 touchdowns. If he can do that for Utah against USC, I feel very confident with what Cameron Rising can do against the Oregon State Beavers. Now, Oregon State is generally overperforming expectations this season, but Pac-12 foes have absolutely scored on them, and I expect that to happen again this week. Skip, give us your fantastic 4 sleepers.
Boy, before I get into mine, I got to do a better job of picking cooler names because you guys nailed it. Max Bortenschlager? Are you kidding me? That is like maybe my favorite name in college football right now. Bortenschlager. I would have said that like 15 times if I had picked him. That was awesome. And then John singing the praises for Clayton Tune. I love it.
I just want to point out that John can never get a name right, and he nails Bortenschlager.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
What is going on? What is going on with this?
I practiced.
And I'm glad, Matt, that you picked Puka because I've always said his name. You said it was Nakau. Is that correct? Because I always say Puka Nakua.
I'm probably right. No, you're probably right.
Oh, because Puka Nakua just sounds cooler, and I want to say it that way. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Anyway, I'm babbling, and I apologize for that, everyone.
Sure about that one.
So I'm going to start off with quarterback Seth Hennigan at Memphis. I think we've talked about him before. It just sounds like one we mentioned a few weeks ago, but he's still owned in only 33% of leagues. He's at UCF, who's giving up 32 points per game. Hennigan's getting the job done. 2,100 yards, 16 touchdowns. A nice plug and play their quarterback for teams that have, again, bye weeks or if you're struggling with injuries. Running back, Devin Achane. I know they've got Spiller there, so he's not the main guy, which would keep people away. But if you just look at what he's doing, he's owned again in like 32% of leagues. He's playing against South Carolina, a little bit stingier defense, giving up 21 points, but he's just 454 yards rushing, 190 receiving, and 5 total touchdowns. So I like Achane, and whenever the game gets out of hand, he's going to get more work, or if they're behind, he might get more receiving work as well. So I think he's a good guy to play and pick up. Stanley Berryhill III at wide receiver for Arizona. He is on less than 20% of rosters, so a very easy pickup. Playing Washington, giving up 20 points per game. And Berryhill III, excuse me, I'm looking something up here, but just can't. There it is. 445 yards on 48 receptions. Really nice volume. The problem is just the 1 touchdown. So if his touchdown numbers are up, he'd be a better play. And then my last guy at the flex is another wide receiver, Joshua Cephas, UTSA. He's getting closer to that 50% threshold, as you can see, 46%, but he's at Louisiana Tech, who's giving up a whopping 31 points per game. So I think you can safely put him in your lineup this week. I like Cephas a lot.
Hey, Skip, you got Berryhill in there. That's a good one.
That's true. Stanley Berryhill III.
There you go. There you go. All right, let's move on to our best bets of the week section. Now, before we jump into the best bets, we got to go over the numbers because, gentlemen, John was out to an early lead on us, but me and Skip have caught up, all right? So now we're getting 3 high percentage perspectives here on the picks. On the season, John is up to 16-8. I am up to 13-8. And Skip is 12-8-1. So we're in it, gentlemen. We are in it, and we're all picking well here. So we're going to each go through our best point spread pick of the week, over, under, and money line. John, I'll let you go ahead and kick it off.
First one I like this week. I know if you look at the raw records, you're going to sit there and you're going to say Western Michigan is 5-2, Toledo's 3-4. But I actually think Toledo's a better team because they play defense. I think Toledo has enough defense to slow down the Broncos. You're getting almost a field goal at home. I love home underdogs who can play defense. And the MAC is not as explosive this year as it has been in the past. I like Toledo. Take the 2.5 here. We've been talking about all the injuries at LSU and Mississippi. You're missing with Butte out and Corral out. You have the 2 best playmakers in the game are gone. But the fans in Vegas have it as a 76 over under. What I'm also thinking about, the Tigers want to run the football. Skip did a great job earlier talking about Tyron Davis. They want to run. I think Mississippi, if they have to play a quarterback who's never taken a snap, they're going to run the football. I don't know how 11 touchdowns are scored in this game. I'm taking the under. I think both teams want to kill the clock, slow it down, and take the ball out of the quarterback's hands. And the last one, Matt mentioned it. Even UCF scored, 16 points. UCF is terrible, but somehow either the bookies or the gambling public still thinks it's UCF. Memphis isn't as good as it has been, but they're better than UCF. I'm getting plus 135 here. I'll take the Tigers.
All right, here for my point spread. Speaking of UCF getting beat down, I'm going to go with Cincinnati. It's a large spread, gentlemen, 23.5 for the second-ranked Cincinnati Bearcats as they go to take on Navy. I do feel confident in this one. Last week was 56-21, but if you were watching the game, it was about 35-0 at halftime, if I'm remembering correctly, and it felt like Cincinnati was already taking their foot off the gas. I think they're going to look to throw the ball more early. I don't think Jerome Ford will have 4 touchdowns at the half, but hey, you never know. And I think Cincinnati is going to be easily going through this game. If you look at Navy, they gave up 35 to Memphis, 31 to SMU, 34 to UCF, 49 to Marshall, 23 to Air Force. So there's certainly room for a underrated Cincinnati offense to run away with this one early. And I understand backdoor cover is certainly a threat in this game, but Cincinnati, I think, is already going to feel the imposter syndrome. Everybody's already saying they shouldn't be the number 2 team in the country. If you think that Luke Fickell is going to take his foot off the gas, you are wrong. He is going to win as big as he can, as often as he can, to make sure that Cincinnati does not get left out of the college football playoff. We're going over under here. It's Oklahoma State, Iowa State. It's an under. I'm going the under here on 46.5. I think it'll be close to this, but Oklahoma State, I watched them very closely last week against Texas. Against a tougher defense there in Iowa State, I think it's going to be a little bit of a struggle. I think they're going to rely on Jaylen Warren as they should. Jaylen Warren, I believe, has gotten over 30 attempts in the last 3 or 4 games. And for good reason, gentlemen. We're talking about a Devi riser here. Jaylen Warren is absolutely somebody to keep your eye on. I think Oklahoma State's going to focus it there. And then Iowa State, I think at this point, knows better than to put the ball in Brock Purdy's hands in big games. And this is certainly a big game for Iowa State. I think it's going to be Breece Hall on the ground. I could see this game easily being a 21-17 game. I think they're going to make it close here, but I'm going to go with the under for these two defensive units. And then the money line. Gentlemen, I talked about this earlier, but I am going with Syracuse at plus 145 here on the money line. I liked what I saw from the Orange last week. And I feel like they are, again, sometimes we get locked a little too hard into the preseason narratives of Virginia Tech. They've struggled this season. They did not look good against Pitt. I think at 145, Syracuse absolutely can win outright in this game. Skip, I'll pass it off to you.
I'm just really happy to see John learned his lesson from last week betting against my Gophers. Well played. They stepped up. Sky Yuma, row the boat. I know this is really ugly as a Gopher fan to say, but I'm picking Wisconsin -3 at Purdue. I think Purdue is going to be coming off that huge win against Iowa, and it's the classic letdown game. Wisconsin struggled early, but I think they're going to start to pick up steam. They're usually a pretty good team, if not a really good team. So I like Wisconsin, even though they're on the road, -3. Over under UTSA and Louisiana Tech. I think this game is going to be a lot of points. It's going over 59.5. I love the opportunities here for points. So that's a fairly confident one that I've got. And then my least confident of the 3, I'm taking a little bit of a chance here. Oklahoma State plus 215. So you're getting your money's worth if it hits, but it's a bigger number. Iowa State is a good team. They're playing on the road. So that's a tough one, but I'm still going Oklahoma State plus 215.
And Skip, that is our nationally ranked UTSA Roadrunners, okay? Top 25 for UTSA. You absolutely love to see it. All right, here, we're going to jump into our DFS segment. And we were talking about this slate earlier this afternoon. It is ugly. All right, I want to point that out. The DraftKings slate is ugly. I never feel as good early in the week as I do on Friday and Saturday when I'm inputting my lineups. But I got to tell you, it's a little bit of a plug your nose type approach to this week's slate. The quarterbacks in particular on DK's main slate are not fantastic. So for me, you have to pay up for Caleb Williams, 9,800. He's going to cost you, but I think it's worth paying up for. Christian Beal-Smith is only 5,000. Wake Forest is playing Army. It's going to be a run-controlled game. Number 16, Deacon Demons, and Christian Beal has been consistently productive. So that's my savings here because I am paying up for Jerome Ford. Gentlemen, I mentioned on last week's show, I actually passed on the DFS segment because I hadn't played in a couple weeks, and I don't like to give advice if I don't have a prior touch point. I still submitted my lineups. I tripled my money last week, and a big part of it was because I played Jerome Ford damn nearly everywhere, and you better believe we're going back to the well this week, 8,300. We talked about that Cincinnati matchup. I think they're going to establish it early against Navy. Going on here, 7,200 for Jahan Dotson. Now, this is a little bit of a risky play. I wanted to put Jahan Dotson in here to identify a sneaky tournament guy because he has a large ceiling. But like John mentioned, if Sean Clifford's out, it's going to be easy to fade him. So I am going to go with Jahan Dotson in this lineup here with a careful eye on what's going to happen here with Sean Clifford. Of course, we're always inputting ours. We're inputting our lineups as close to game time as possible to keep up with those news points. But going to Maryland here, wide receiver Daryl Jones, just 3,600. Now, Daryl Jones doesn't have a ton of production on his own at this point in the season, but I always like to try to find a minimum priced wide receiver to allow me to pay up at the other positions. Now, Daryl Jones for Maryland here, I mentioned they are down 2 wide receivers. Maryland has struggled the last couple of weeks. They got Ohio State, and I'm forgetting it. They had another really tough defensive unit that they had to play. Now this week, things turn around for them. They get a little golden. They get to play the Gophers here, and I think that Maryland is going to want to open up the attack a little bit more. So I wouldn't doubt if they might be interested in targeting Daryl Jones here. And then another savings guy, Phillip Brooks, Kansas State, 4,400. Now, Kansas State's got a pretty interesting matchup this week. It may lead to a decent amount of passing. Phillip Brooks, 20 receptions, 279 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the season. So, again, not a super sexy play right off the bat, but you kind of got to read between the lines, dig into that potential high-scoring matchup. Now, this has kind of put me in a tough spot. I didn't have a ton of money left over at the flex spot, so I went with Charlie Kohler of Iowa State, trying to lean into a low-scoring game. I think Oklahoma State is going to bring a lot of pressure here against Brock Purdy, and I think he's going to rely underneath on Charlie Kohler. And so that's what I'm going for in my flex spot. And then similar to what I mentioned with Daryl Jones, I've always got to have a stack there somewhere. So I'm going to go with Leah Tagovailoa here for that same reason. I think he's going to open up the offense. Now, he's got a little bit of a knock because it was Iowa and Ohio State. That was the 2 offenses. In that Iowa game, he did not look good. But remember, through the first 4 games of the season, he looked like one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, consistently putting up over 350 yards a game, 3-4 touchdown games. So I'm going back to the well. I'm taking the discount and remembering the quarterback we had when he's not playing Iowa and Ohio State. $7,000. I'm willing to pay up for him at that price. All right, John, give us your fantastic 4 for the DK Saturday slate.
I believe you have to start with Caleb Williams. We finally have seen him unlock that Oklahoma offense. I mean, it looks like the Baker Mayfield, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray offense. It has been awesome to watch the last 6 quarters. I think he's been at the helm. He's 9,800. I don't usually give top-end advice at the quarterback, but Matt Corral's 10,200. I'm going here. And even the Mississippi's backup is 9,600. I'm not paying 9,600 for a backup quarterback against LSU. So go with Caleb Williams here. I needed one cheap asset in this passing game. I'm going with Mike Woods. Only 4,400. If you get in the end zone with Woods, you probably score over 15 points. For 4,400, I like to pair up my quarterback wide receiver duo. I agree with Matt. Jerome Ford, I think he's almost a must play now. 49 and 32 points in back-to-back weeks. And those are just the raw numbers. If you've seen how well he is running, it's unbelievable. Jerome Ford is playing great. You got to play him here. And Tyrion Davis-Price, how can you not start him in this game? He has the number of carries. I think he's had over 25 carries in back-to-back weeks. 22 and 36 carries, 29 and 49 points. I'm going with the LSU Tiger here. That's my fantastic 4.
All right, gentlemen, there you have it. Our DFS best bets, CFF sleepers, and marvelous matchups of the week. I am fired up. I am ready for another great week of college football. Enjoy the action. Enjoy the slate. Best of luck to your teams, and we will be back at it next week for week 9. Thanks for